The film begins by showing a small town named San Miguel, located near the border of Mexico and the United States. One day, a nameless stranger, whom we will refer to as Joe, arrives in San Miguel after a long journey riding his horse. At that moment, Joe decides to take a short rest. While drinking water from a well, Joe notices a young boy trying to enter a house. Unfortunately, several men inside the house quickly chase the boy away harshly, causing the boy to run home, where he is embraced by his father, who appears to be worried about him. But shortly afterward, the same men who chased the boy away begin to beat the boy's father. Meanwhile, from inside the house, a beautiful woman named Marisol is seen looking out the window. Upon hearing the commotion, Marisol looks frightened and quickly closes the window, while Joe decides to continue his journey. As Joe rides further into the town, he finds that the atmosphere is eerily quiet because the townspeople prefer to hide inside their homes. As a stranger, Joe's presence in the town seems unwelcome, with some people insulting him and firing a few shots to intimidate him. Soon after that, Joe arrives at an inn, which also serves as a tavern, where he meets the innkeeper, an old man named Silvanito. Even though Silvanito knows that Joe has no money, he still offers Joe food and drink. Not only that, but Silvanito even offers Joe a place to stay while he is in town. Silvanito then explains that many people in the town have died, especially the men, while most of the women remaining are widows. Furthermore, Silvanito explains the ongoing feud between two factions that frequently engage in fights. One is the family of Sheriff John Baxter, and the other is the Rojo brothers, consisting of Don Miguel, Esteban, and Ramon Rojo. Besides Silvanito, Joe also meets Peripero, an old coffin maker. After learning about the feud, Joe thinks he might be able to take advantage of the situation to gain financial profit by working for both sides. Joe then demonstrates his shooting skills by killing 4 men who insulted him when he entered the town and asked Peripero to prepare 4 coffins for them. Soon after that, Joe meets Don Miguel, one of the Rojo brothers, and expresses his desire to join them. After witnessing his shooting abilities, Don Miguel immediately accepts Joe into their group and even offers him a room. However, Joe refuses and chooses to stay with Silvanito. Not long after, Joe goes with Silvanito to a location where a group of Mexican soldiers is about to make a trade with the United States military. While observing them from a distance, Silvanito informs Joe that the Mexican soldiers are carrying a wooden chest filled with gold, which will be exchanged for weapons. However, when the Mexican soldiers arrive at a place near the river, they are met by a group of U.S. soldiers who then massacre them completely. Surprisingly, the U.S. soldiers turn out to be the Rojo brothers and their gang, who had been disguising themselves as American soldiers all along to steal the gold. Upon learning that, Joe immediately comes up with a brilliant idea to exploit the situation for his own benefit. That night, after everyone has left, Joe quickly goes to the site of the massacre and takes 2 corpses of the Mexican soldiers to the cemetery. Instead of burying them, he props the 2 bodies against a tombstone so they appear as if they are still alive and resting. Soon after that, Joe informs the Rojo brothers that 2 Mexican soldiers survive and are currently at the cemetery. Hearing this, the Rojo brothers are shocked, as they were certain they had killed all the Mexican soldiers. Fearing that their crime will be uncovered, the Rojo brothers rush to the cemetery to finish off the 2 surviving Mexican soldiers, while one of their men, Chico, is assigned to guard the stolen loot, which is hidden in their ranch house. As part of his plan, Joe also meets the sheriff, John Baxter, and informs him of the Rojo brothers' involvement in the massacre of the Mexican soldiers, who were known to be carrying a chest of gold. At that time, Joe explained to John that the Rojo brothers and their gang had massacred the Mexican soldiers and stolen the chest of gold. However, 2 soldiers managed to survive and are now at the cemetery. John is pleased with this information, thinking that he finally has a chance to topple the Rojo brothers' power in the town. Therefore, John immediately heads to the cemetery with his son, Antonio. After successfully deceiving both the Rojo brothers and the Baxter family, Joe sneaks into the Rojo brothers' ranch house and manages to incapacitate Chico, who was assigned to guard the stash. Inside, Joe found the gold that the Rojo brothers had stolen from the Mexican soldiers, so Joe planned to steal the gold. However, before he could carry out his plan, he heard someone entering the place, making him alert and ready to face the worst. As the footsteps grew closer, Joe prepared to throw his punch, thinking the person was Chico or one of the Rojo brothers' men. But unexpectedly, it was Marisol who entered, and Joe accidentally knocked her unconscious as his punch hit her. It turns out that the boy Joe saw trying to enter the town was Marisol's son, who wanted to meet his mother. However, the Rojo brothers' men chased the boy away because Marisol was currently being held hostage by Ramon Rojo. Knowing this, Joe had the idea of taking Marisol to the Baxter family's place, as he didn't want her to reveal his identity or expose his plan to pit the two factions against each other for his own benefit. Meanwhile, at the cemetery, a gunfight broke out between the Rojo brothers and the Baxter family. During the fight, Ramon managed to kill the two dead Mexican soldiers that Joe had placed in the cemetery, while his brothers were engaged in a fierce battle against the Baxter family. At that moment, the Rojo brothers dominated the shootout and captured Antonio, taking him hostage. However, when they returned home, Ramon panicked when he discovered that Marisol had suddenly disappeared. Ramon assumed that the Baxter family had kidnapped Marisol, and his suspicion was confirmed when the Baxter family arranged to return Marisol to the Rojo brothers in exchange for Antonio. The following day, the two feuding factions agreed to exchange hostages in the town, witnessed by the entire townsfolk. At that moment, Marisol's son, Juanito, and her husband, Julio, approached her, intending to rescue her. Upon seeing this, Ramon ordered his men to kill Julio, but he was immediately stopped by Silvanito and Joe, who didn't want Juanito to witness his father's murder in front of him. Joe then instructed Marisol to return to Ramon and told Julio to take his son and go home immediately. At that moment, Joe had already been informed by Silvanito that Marisol had been taken hostage by Ramon because he accused Julio of cheating in a card game. That night, the Rojo brothers invited Joe to celebrate their success by drinking together. However, Joe, who sympathized with Marisol, secretly planned to free her. Joe pretended to be drunk and was taken to a room where he could rest. Once Ramon's men left, Joe sneaked out, killed the guards, and freed Marisol. Joe then destroyed the place where Marisol was held to create the impression that there had been an attack from the Baxter family. Soon after that, Joe took Marisol to meet Julio and their son. In addition, Joe gave them money and told them to leave town for their safety. On the other hand, the Rojo brothers eventually discovered that Joe had freed Marisol. They were furious that Joe had betrayed them, so they captured and tortured him, hoping he would reveal Marisol's location. However, since Joe remained silent, they locked him up in a warehouse. Soon after that, when Chico and one of the guards went to check on Joe in the room, they were shocked as a barrel of liquor came rolling quickly toward them. Unable to dodge it in time, the barrel struck them hard, killing them. Meanwhile, Joe, still weak, crawled out of the room, struggling to escape. At the same time, Ramon and his men, having heard the commotion, rushed to the scene and found that Joe had escaped, though in reality, he was hiding near the door. Joe waited for them all to enter the room, then lit a fire to burn the place down. Unfortunately, Ramon and his men managed to escape, but the fire spread quickly, so Ramon ordered everyone to extinguish the flames while he and his men went to Silvanito's place, knowing that he was friends with Joe. Meanwhile, Joe, who overheard their conversation while hiding under the wooden floor, tried to warn Silvanito, but he was too late as Ramon and his men had already arrived. Ramon and his men immediately interrogated Silvanito, even brutally torturing the old man to get information about Joe's whereabouts. However, Silvanito, who had no idea where Joe was, chose to remain silent, even as Ramon beat him mercilessly. Joe, witnessing this, silently seethed with anger, as in his current condition, he was unable to save Silvanito. With no other choice, Joe went to Peripero and asked the old man to hide him inside a coffin before taking him away. Shortly after, the Rojo brothers, thinking that Joe might have sought refuge with the Baxter family, burned down the Baxter's residence. Not only that, but they also ruthlessly killed the Baxter family members, even though they had surrendered. At the same time, Joe, hidden inside the coffin, witnessed the Rojo brothers' cruelty as they slaughtered their enemies, even killing an unarmed woman. The following day, Joe was seen hiding in an abandoned mine, where he worked to recover and practiced his shooting skills to exact revenge on the Rojo brothers. Joe then prepared a steel plate and tested its strength to withstand bullets. It turned out that Joe planned to use the steel plate as protection when he confronted Ramon Rojo, who was known for using a long rifle and shooting his enemies in the heart. Soon after that, Peripero came to see Joe and informed him that the Rojo brothers had captured and frequently tortured Silvanito in an attempt to force him to reveal his whereabouts. But so far, Silvanito had remained silent to protect him. Upon learning that, Joe decided to return to the town immediately to save Silvanito. When Joe arrived, he saw Ramon and his men had hung Silvanito and were torturing him. Ramon, who had been anticipating his arrival to kill him, fired a shot at Joe, knocking him down. Ramon was confident that he had killed Joe. But soon after, Joe suddenly got up as if the bullet had no effect on him. Seeing this, Ramon was shocked and fired again. But Joe remained standing and even challenged Ramon to shoot him in the heart while slowly walking towards Silvanito. Frustrated, Ramon fired several times until he ran out of ammunition, but Joe still stood and was completely unharmed. Realizing that Ramon's ammunition was depleted, Joe revealed his secret by showing the steel plate he had hidden under his poncho. After revealing his secret, Joe quickly shot the men standing behind Ramon, killing them. Soon after, Joe used his last bullet to free Silvanito. Joe then challenged Ramon to reload his rifle faster than he could reload his revolver, but Ramon lost the challenge, and Joe quickly shot and killed him. However, unbeknownst to Joe, Esteban Rojo was hiding in a building, preparing to kill him with his rifle. Fortunately, Silvanito noticed this and skillfully shot and killed Esteban. The film ends with Joe bidding farewell to Silvanito before riding his horse and leaving San Miguel, which has now become a peaceful small town. Moral lesson from the story: always remember, if you're trying to fool everyone, don't accidentally knock out the lady who could save you. And if you're hiding in a coffin, make sure it's not the one that's being used as a table at the party.